Welcome to the StockMiner.com studios in Black Hills, South Dakota. I'm your stock miner, Brian Johnson, making professional trading simple. And it looked for a while there like we were going to have a pretty flat day in the markets. And we had a pretty flat day in the market up until about that last 60 minutes or so. Things started to pick up then. We had a gap up this morning, moved our way down, hit some support, and started to take off upwards again. As you can see, the Dow finishing up above 10,500. I was very curious to see if that would happen today. And certainly it did. So now, if we look at the larger daily, you can see the Dow doing exactly what all the other indices are doing, and that is breaking resistance and continuing to slowly move itself up. Now, granted, not quite as far as what we've seen on the other indices, but yet the movement is there. So now, if we do see a pullback in the NASDAQ or a pullback in the S&P, would not surprise me to see the Dow a little stronger than the rest of those two as it moves up and then rolls over, and being the lagger would then come back down. So you can see a close here on a daily above that resistance area, staying within this high basing formation we've seen, breaking out above it today. I was curious to see if it would move back down, and very curious as I looked at it intraday to see if it would close below that 10,500 level. And you'll see that it got as low as 10,506, and that's where the bulls took over again. It found its support at that 10,500 level and shot back up very quickly towards the end of the day. So after the gap up in the morning, we closed right about where we started the day at. That was up about 27 points. Not really a whole lot of movement on the indices themselves when it was all said and done, but still continuing to move upwards. NASDAQ on a 60-minute up 8 points today. Here on a daily, you can see it once again continuing its straight up climb, breaking all kinds of overhead resistance levels now. We'll continue to watch the NASDAQ from a weekly standpoint. Yes, it is only Monday, but you can see it coming up and over last week's high already. So we'll see what the rest of the week brings. Let's see if it pulls back ever so slightly. I am expecting somewhat of a pullback. I don't know if that'll happen this week. But when it does pull back, I'm looking to see if it'll hold at this 1815 area or if it'll break back down below it. So for you tech lovers, that would be the level you'll be watching on the NASDAQ. SPX on a 60-minute, you can see it once again at the very end of the day, hitting previous support area back here. The low is 1123. It's kind of an odd place to be bouncing off of, but that 1120 area, and moving straight back up at the end of the day. Down all day long, as were the other indices, and then once again finishing up towards its high. If we look at it on a daily, right here, notice how it closed right at that overhead resistance. So now we've seen it hold over and over again. We've seen this range hold over and over again. This time it was beat. They broke through it. Now we're back up to this overhead resistance. Do you short? Do you take the chance? I don't see why not. It's held in the past. However, you're going to want to keep your stops tight. If you take a short up here, or did take a short up here, I'd recommend you keep a stop up here around the above the 1130, 1135 mark, depending on how much pain you can take. At that point, you're kind of up and over this area, and I wouldn't just necessarily trust that by the end of the day it would move back down again. I would be out of it and wait for a little better entry. Taking a look at the SPX on a weekly, very early yet, but you can see it poking its head up and over this resistance. That's what we saw on the NASDAQ. No reason to think that the other indices won't follow. VIX on a daily, gapping up to start the day, which was odd because that's what the markets did. The markets gapped up. Of course, the VIX moving down all day, markets moving down all day, so the VIX was moving pretty much in tandem. Of course, at the end of the day, the markets moved back up, the VIX went nowhere. But curious to see the VIX gap up and move down after the markets gapped up. So a little bit of a divergence there, but you know what? Not something you should be concerned about. We're still within this little range here on the VIX, which means no fear. So markets continue to move up. Watch this thing to actually test this green line. I thought it would do that last week, but it continued to move up, and the markets will get this thing to eventually test this lower green line. Apple on a 60-minute. It had another good day, up another $2.57. If you were not long or did not stay long from last week, though, very difficult to play this. It moved up to begin the day, rolled back over and came back down before, as the other indices did, finishing kind of strong here towards the end. But if you stayed in it, then you have been doing very well. You can see the big potential doji reversal pattern up here. I don't really know if we're going to see any confirmation of that tomorrow, but you know we are up quite a ways in a short amount of time on Apple. So unless it breaks that 214 area, I'd probably stay away from going long Apple right now, unless you're very comfortable with an intraday trade on it. If we look at Apple on a weekly, you can see it starting the week very nicely as well, up and above last week's high. If we look at AOB on a 60-minute, this was one we wanted to watch today. It was basically flat, only up 3 cents today. Putting in the same type of formation we're going to see on a lot of other things, and that's this big doji. If we go ahead and look at AVY on a 60-minute, same type of thing, only down 7 cents today. Just not much movement in here. We're still waiting for a break up above here or a break down below here to take our entry. Don't know if we'll get that this week, but we want to be watching it carefully in case we do get that. ED on a 60-minute, also going nowhere with the markets moving flat, trying its best to get up and over this overhead resistance. We're still looking for a break above 46, 46.25 to get long on ED. FAS on a 60-minute, pulling back today, only finishing down 30 cents when it was all said and done, but doing what the indices did, gapping up and then falling backwards all day long until the very end. Once again on a daily, not putting in the same type of doji, but putting in a very decent looking spinning top. You'll see that it held once it hit this support line down here. That support line held very well. This line here, once again, is the zone to be very careful trading in when it comes to FAS. Anything can happen, but you can see how it held very nicely today. So be very careful playing this in here. If it gets down to this level, not a bad idea to take a long on it, but you want a very, very tight stop below it in case it drops out of it. FAZ on a 60-minute, you can see it hitting this lower level as well. I mentioned that we would probably see a test of this. Certainly did today. It held very nicely, continued its move up until the end of the day where it moved back down. But very logical on the FAZ move. See how it bounced right off of support and moved right back up into overhead resistance before moving back down? This was a great intraday trade for any of those that were playing this. From a daily standpoint, though, still very ugly. Below the heavier and bigger overhead resistance. This is not bullish behavior for FAZ to be closing and staying below this area. Any breakdown below that 1870, 1860 area is probably going to make for another good short on FAZ. FIS was one we added today, down 26 cents today. Not being able to break above this overhead resistance quite yet and not giving us any entry to the short side. So we'll continue to wait, see if we get a break over 24. And otherwise a break below the 2340 area. FIS on a weekly. Too early yet, but going nowhere. You can see it has not broken this bottom line, nor has it broken overhead resistance. So, still waiting for an entry on it. And that really closes out the day. I mean, very quick video. Not much to talk about because the markets went sideways. Now, the things to keep in mind, though, are that it has closed and did close above all of these overhead resistance areas. So in the first day of trading, we did not see a quick pullback by the markets into any lower support areas. SPX the most curious, where it's at overhead resistance on this bigger channel that we're watching here. But still no big pullback to test any of this previous support, this being down here at the 1115 mark. So be watching tomorrow for any kind of a move. If it gets up above 1130, that might be another good opportunity to take a defensive long play. Otherwise, if it breaks down, you may see it come back and retest this 1115 mark on the SPX. Same thing on the Dow. Look for it to come back and retest 10500. NASDAQ, it's in the ozone layer right now. If it comes back, it's got a long ways to go before it has any kind of a test of that 1815 to 1818 area on the NASDAQ. So I'll be back with you tomorrow. Hopefully we'll start to get some real movement in the markets. Today was none of the sort. You could have shorted the indices today. But by the end of the day, we're right back to where we began. And that's the bulls are still in charge. The bears are still have absolutely no interest right now in stepping in and selling off this market. So we will continue to stay neutral to bullish in our bias. I'll be back with you again tomorrow night. Take care of your money, because nobody cares more about it than you do.